Tucker examines leaked document detailing China's cover-up. Tucker Carlson breaks down a new report that examines the cover-up of the outbreak and says it most likely came from the research lab in China.
Over the weekend, the Daily Telegraph, an Australian newspaper, ran an amazing story. It consisted of excerpts from a new 15-page intelligence assessment on China's role in the disaster. This assessment was written by officials from the so-called Five Eyes, the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, their combined intelligence. It was a multinational effort. In effect, this new report confirms much of what we've suspected. No, the virus likely did not come from mammals that for some reason were being sold in a seafood market in Wuhan. Not from bats, not from pangolins, whatever those are. No, instead, it much more likely came from a research lab, as the Chinese all but admitted at the outset. As this assessment notes, the Wuhan Institute of Virology was performing extensive research on bat coronaviruses at the time of the outbreak. Here's the full timeline that the document lays out. It's fascinating. We've known some of this, some we didn't know. Here it is. By early December, authorities in China knew that this disease could spread from person to person. That's a very important thing to know about a coronavirus. Coronaviruses live in animals, but the ones that can spread to human beings, by definition, are dangerous to us. They lied about that. The government of Taiwan knew. They issued a warning about it in late December. Experts in Hong Kong knew, too. They did the same on January 4th. Yet despite the overwhelming evidence, the Chinese Communist Party claimed no, the virus could not be spread from person to person. And then China convinced the World Health Organization to repeat this deadly lie, which they did continuously until January 20th. On New Year's Eve, China began censoring online search engines in their country. Chinese authorities suppressed searches for terms like Wuhan unknown pneumonia, SARS variation, and Wuhan seafood market. On January 2nd, Hubei province's health authority ordered genomics companies to stop testing for the new virus, ordered them to destroy, not save, destroy, any samples of the virus they had already collected. One day later, China's National Health Commission banned the publication of any research on the virus. In the middle of an outbreak that became an epidemic that became a global pandemic, they banned research. Day by day, this cover-up became crazier and more intense. From January 5th to January 18th, Wuhan officials refused to offer any updates on the spread of the virus. On January 14th, the chief of China's National Health Commission warned, in private, that the Wuhan coronavirus was very likely to become a, quote, major public health event. In other words, a disaster in which many would die. But the Chinese government hid that news from the world. We didn't know because they hid it. 10 days later, authorities in China blocked the Wuhan Institute of Virology from sharing viral samples with colleagues around the world, including at the University of Texas. Meanwhile, Chinese doctors who tried to warn the public, and there were several, were arrested, punished, and possibly murdered. On January 2nd, Chinese state media announced the arrest of 8 people. Chinese police warned the public not to, quote, fabricate rumors, not to spread rumors, not to believe rumors. So why was China doing all of this? To save face, obviously, but there were other reasons. A new report by the Department of Homeland Security suggests one of those reasons. As China downplayed the epidemic internationally, the Chinese government was busy stockpiling medical supplies for itself, taking them from the rest of the world for itself. In January, China increased imports of surgical masks by 278%. They increased imports of surgical gowns by 72%, of surgical gloves by 32%. In February, meanwhile, Chinese medical supply exports dropped dramatically. But at first, the numbers didn't reflect that. People were confused. Why? Because China delayed the research of trade data to hide what they were doing. And then the Chinese government began emitting smokescreens in the media. They used Western race guilt as a defensive weapon against the West. While China imposed tough internal travel restrictions, for example, it attacked Western governments for any restrictions they thought about placing on China as racist. Result? Many thousands of people left Wuhan and came to Western countries, where they started outbreaks in dozens of cities. New York, Seattle, Milan. At the same time, Chinese diplomats began telling the world that the virus actually had come from America, maybe from the U.S. military, maybe from a lab. They denounced any claims to the contrary as, give you 3 guesses, racist. And it worked. Of course it worked. That's why they did it. As the European Union prepared a report on the coronavirus, Chinese diplomats pressured the EU, successfully, to remove language on China's lying, its rampant misinformation about it. Western media, needless to say, played along with all of this. Why? Because instinctively they know at a gut level that any criticism of Western civilization must be true, of course. So it was easy for them to wind up as willing pawns of Chinese government propaganda. And pawns they were. So that's how it all began, according to this multinational intel report.